Hi everyone, it's been quite a while since my last video. I've just been busy with life in general and haven't quite gotten around to creating something new, so here I am today with something new. And it's going to be a little bit different to my last two videos. I've been experimenting and trying something different each time. This time I thought I'd try a lecture format just to change it up and see if it hits a middle ground. I know that the shorter videos do better than the longer ones. I want to try and go for something somewhere in between and see if that works for us. So, if you couldn't already tell by the silhouette in the corner, this video is going to be about Dragalge. So, this lecture is called Building Different with Dragalge, and it is a bit of a different deck. Most decks in the format at the moment dole out the damage with just base damage powered up by whatever effects and aim to take 6 prizes. And I mean, this deck also looks to take 6 prizes, but it does it a bit differently. Poison Cultivation puts 10 damage counters on poison Pokemon between turns instead of 1. That is the whole strategy behind this deck. So the idea is that you inflict poison, you have a bunch of cards based around Dragalge to help it do that. One of the important things to note with Dragalge is that it doesn't actually inflict poison itself. It increases the amount of damage that poison status does between turns. So there is a need to build around it to make it work. You, of course, get to exploit its status as a single prize attacker, which means that you can afford to lose a bit more Pokemon throughout the game than your opponent can. And you look to consume your opponent's switching effects as well, and punish them for it too if they don't retreat by discarding energy, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So what's the reason for wanting to build this type of deck? Well, I'd be lying if I didn't come out and say that it was just cool and different. It is a cool and different idea. There is a lot of similarity between the decks at the top tier at the moment, and not that there's anything wrong with that, and not that there's anything wrong with wanting to play those types of decks. I certainly understand competitive mindsets and wanting to get that W, but at the moment we don't have premier events. We have Players Cup, but whenever those aren't going on, you sort of have to make up your own fun with the game. You certainly go looking for online tournaments, but if you're anything like me, you just need to set your own goals with the game and make your own fun, especially because there's a lack of ranked mode and things like that too. So building this kind of deck lets you see the card pool differently and you think about cards differently. And something that I realized throughout the process is that a bad idea doesn't mean you can't optimize and improve it. So maybe your goal is to build a deck around your favorite Pokemon because that brings you the most joy in this game. Nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean that you can't improve the deck that you build. There is certainly a most optimal way of playing that deck, even if the deck's not very good overall. So let's think about the deck building thought process. It is an iterative thing. So the first deck that you put together with the Pokemon you choose to put together certainly won't be your last draft. It is definitely a first draft. You'll definitely, if you're anything like me when it comes to deck building, head into your first game and remember, oh, I need to include 4 of this supporter I totally forgot. I forgot to put in 4 Quick Ball or something silly like that. Even beyond silly mistakes in deck building like that, you'll reach a point where you're thinking about how you lose almost as much as how you win. So, of course, with Dragalge, you've got to figure out how to win with the deck, how to execute the strategy. However, there are a lot of reasons why Dragalge is not a tier 1 deck, and you've got to look to cover those reasons to try and win those games that you wouldn't otherwise. So what I do is I put all my ideas in a basket, and start peeling it away until I reach 60 cards. So I might put 80 cards into a list and go, okay, well, I probably don't need all of that search, or I don't need that tech attacker, and you keep peeling the cards away until you hit 60, and then you've sort of got a base to work with. So let's think about what the base for Dragalge is. So Dragalge has got what I call the poison package. You've got Dragalge, and we've spoken about that already and how that card works. It sits alongside Garbodor, so Garbodor is probably the other really important piece of the puzzle here. Poisonous Puddle basically lets you inflict poison without consuming much. Okay, so there are a few different ways to inflict poison currently. Attacking to inflict poison is probably too slow, so it needs to be something that doesn't consume your attack for the turn. You've got something like Koga. I believe Koga inflicts poison and confusion. I'll amend that in a comment in the YouTube video if I'm wrong, but again, inflicting poison whilst consuming your supporter for the turn, probably a little bit too slow. Setting up Garbodor is something that you can do at the same time as your other goals. So as you draw through your deck, you'll pick up the pieces for Garbodor, and I think that is the best way to go about inflicting poison without taking up your supporter or attack for the turn. Alongside these two, you've also got Toxicroak. Toxicroak's ability, More Poison, inflicts, or rather, it increases the number of damage counters that are placed during Pokemon Checkup, which is the name for that point in time between turns. So the idea here is that Poison Cultivation brings it up to 10 damage counters, and then More Poison puts you up into 120 counters, 12 damage counters per turn. So you start looking at doing things like two hitting is a bit of a weird term in this case, but it only takes 2 counts of poison to knock out Pikachu and Zekrom GX, for example. That extra 20 per turn makes 3 ticks of that poison knock out most VMAXs as well. So it is a good inclusion, although secondary when it comes to your setup. Speaking of setup, you want to look to do that via Jirachi and Snorlax. So the Jirachi I mean in this case is the one from Team Up, although it might be worth testing the amazing Jirachi setup as well. Snorlax I think is really good, the Gourmandized one that just came out in Vivid Voltage. Very, very good at helping you set up early game. Latios GX is included in the deck as well as a tech option for ADPization and Mewbox as well. So just looking to use that Clear Vision GX move to remove their GX options. Trainers and energy. So Dust Island is a pretty big one in the deck. It's required to maintain the poison status on opponents that try to use Switch to move out. Of course, that's not going to work 100% of the time, but you will reach... It does make things just a little bit more difficult for the opponent, and towards the end game, that's when you start running them out of their switching effects, or their ability to retreat with ease. I include Great Ball in my list. Maybe you don't want to. Maybe you want to include something like Pokemon Communication instead. I just use Great Ball because there's a very high Pokemon count in the deck, and because there's a lot of stage 1s as well, I think that Great Ball is fine to use. Some unique considerations for the deck. I run multiple Ordinary Rod to recover Pokemon and energy, as well as multiple Tool Scrapper. You need to get rid of those air balloons and HP increasing tools to make sure your poison math works out. There's a low energy count in the deck because you're only attacking a Dragalge. I include 7. Maybe you could go a little thinner because you've got Ordinary Rod. Horror Energy is also leveraged here, so Horror Energy also applies damage when a Pokemon with Horror Energy attached receives damage even if it's knocked out, so very good for this type of deck, and can help you reach numbers like 260, 280 maybe. So quite good. And it also helps when perhaps you're not able to set up Toxicroak straight away. So, what's your first turn look like in this deck? Well, you're looking to get Jirachi or Snorlax into the active spot as soon as possible. Ideally, a Skrelp and a Trubbish on the board. Multiple if you can, but one of each is enough. You need to think about whether your opponent has a quick method of knocking out that Skrelp or Trubbish. Of course, knowing that you need to have a Pokemon in play for a turn before you can evolve it means that having multiple of those two in play is ideal, because if they use boss's orders and knock it out, that means you're basically set behind a turn as far as the strategy of the deck goes. Croagunk is also good, but not necessary immediately. Mid to late game, you're using Garbodor's ability alongside Dust Island to inflict poison status and attack with Poison Cultivation. Your ideal setup will be 2 Dragalge, 2 Garbodor, and 1 Toxicroak with a spare spot as needed. So, maybe it's that Jirachi or Snorlax, or perhaps you even go for the second Croagunk if you're really set up and you can afford to use up that space like that. When you're playing in the mid to late game, you need to think about what Pokemon you can promote in certain situations after receiving a knockout. When your opponent knocks you out, if your opponent is already poisoned and already afflicted with Poison Cultivation, maybe you can look for a mid-game Jirachi or Snorlax, or promoting something else. The point here is that you don't need to promote Dragalge if it doesn't achieve anything. And maybe you want to leave up another Pokemon and not lose the Dragalge. In some situations, anyhow. Maybe your hand doesn't look so good, and you're waiting on a knockout before you get your prizes, and perhaps there's a supporter in there that'll help you out. This is the time where you want to start looking to use Tool Scrapper as well to remove those air balloons and HP increasing items. And Stealthy Hood, you've got to watch out for Stealthy Hood as well. So, just a few tips and considerations with this deck. Think about what you need the turn upcoming. I already mentioned this before, but another thing to consider is, can you get away with that inflicting poison? Consider it for the Stadium Wars and removing Chaotic Swell. So an example here is, maybe your opponent plays down Chaotic Swell, you've got a Stadium in hand, and you want to get rid of the Chaotic Swell so you can eventually get another Dust Island into play. Make sure that you remember to inflict poison first. So Garbodor's ability relies on a Stadium being in play. So use the ability first, inflict the poison, and then remove the Stadium. Okay, so that's a really important sequencing consideration in this deck. Also, don't forget about Sharp Fin. 40 damage is not a lot, but when you're trying to rack up the exact amount of damage to get a knockout, 40 damage can be the difference, so don't forget about Sharp Fin. You've also got Trubbish's attack if it's really necessary. It does extra damage if the opponent's poisoned. In a pinch, you could also attack with Croagunk if you only need to get an extra 10 damage on the board. And in a really big pinch, you've got Skrelp's attack to inflict poison as well, so don't forget about that. Here's the list. I thought I'd share that at the end. You can think about including different Pokemon. Maybe you want to include Marshadow with the ability to remove stadiums with Resetting Hole. That could be a consideration here. Maybe you can peel away an Ordinary Rod to fit an extra trainer. Maybe you want a third Boss's Orders or something like that. Of course, the Great Ball is an option to move out and shift some Pokemon communication in. So 3 Air Balloon I find is necessary to support the idea that you want to retreat the active Pokemon and get Jirachi or Snorlax on the first turn. And also you need Air Balloon to have any hope of retreating the Snorlax, because its retreat cost is at a hefty 3. So I'll mention that the Dragalge is at the max count because it's really important to have set up. Garbodor is a little thinner at 3-2, and I would certainly accept any argument to increase that to a 3-3 count. Maybe you cut an Ordinary Rod. Croagunk and Toxicroak at a 2-2 because you don't need it straight away, but it would be good to have set up if you can. Okay, so that's about it for the list. I won't mention too much more about the deck list, and I'll leave it to you to have a look at, have a think about. Maybe you would play it a little bit differently. Maybe you want to cut a Marnie, get a Rosa, a second Rosa in there. Could be good. It definitely needs a bit more refinement, but I have found that this can win games. It can win games. It's not going to win every game, but it can win. So let me know what you thought about this format. It is a lot easier for me to make presentations this way than it is to do really complicated videos like the Inteleon VMAX video I did a little while ago. And I like to think that it's a bit more consumable than the long form video that I did before with the last deck that I shared a video on, where I shared the list and I played for an extended period of time. So I believe that was the Lapras VMAX and Articuno deck list. So yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments. Please talk to me in the comments if you've got any thoughts. Maybe you want to ask me a few questions. Maybe you want to request a deck for me to look at closely, whether it's a tier 1 deck or a rogue deck or somewhere in between. I'm all open to ideas. So thank you if you got to this point for watching. I really appreciate it. I look at my analytics, and just the fact that you watched it through, it means a lot. So like and comment and subscribe and all those good things, and I will see you in the next video or live stream. Thank you and have a good day. See you later.